Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta go into this. I gotta do a really brief review on this movie. Star Wars The Last Jedi. I just saw it. First, Psalms 59 verse 17 says, "Unto you, O my strength, will I sing. For God is my defense and the God of my mercy." Star Wars The Last Jedi got a bad rap. Got a bad rap by people who saw it. I'm not quite sure what audiences go inside to see a movie in a theater anymore for. I think the movies that did well in 2017 were mostly hee hee ha ha comic book movies. When I think of the movie Thor Ragnarok, which is absolute shit compared to this movie, people went and saw that. They went and saw Jumanji. But movies like Star Wars The Last Jedi are meaningful movies. Period. Now, let me dispel the things that were circulating about this movie, which people said, that's common language. One, they said this was a disappointment. It didn't disappoint me one end. In fact, I'm going to go back in the cinema and see it again. Two, they said it wasn't connected to The Force Awakens. This thing is severely connected to The Force Awakens. Three, they said that, sometimes the characters in this movie didn't behave like characters in Star Wars. And that's, again, baloney. Actually, the characters did behave like characters in Star Wars. In fact, it reminds me, this movie, of A New Hope. Okay? And in fact, certain things that certain characters do in this movie explain what happened in A New Hope. Literally explain, verbally and visually. Okay? Now, with respect to certain scenes that happen in this movie, some people think it's unbelievable, certain scenes, because of the physics and whatever. I would say to them, well, listen, if you don't believe the scene, then you don't have to. But I think there's an explanation for it, if you're a Star Wars fan, why that particular scene worked the way it did. That's just my personal opinion. So, the acting in this movie was top-notch. The story and plot of this movie was solid. And I think Star Wars The Last Jedi for 2017, I may have to revise what I say, but I thought, Justice League was my most anticipated movie. I hadn't seen Star Wars The Last Jedi. But after seeing Star Wars The Last Jedi, the breathing room they used to tell the story, the plot, which you didn't really know how things were going to pan out, all the way down to the end of the movie, which I found fantastic. And even the name, Star Wars The Last Jedi, is a fantastic name, because the thought that you have in your mind about it is not exactly the way how the movie ends, which is interesting. So, there's a lot about this movie that makes it very, very interesting on so many different levels. Like I said, this movie has a lot in common with A New Hope. It also is a continuity to The Force Awakens. And I can understand why The Force Awakens needed to be. I look forward to Star Wars Episode 9 because it really sets the stage for something very, very interesting. And this movie kind of gives us a feel of Star Wars Rebels. It gives us a feel of Star Wars A New Hope. It gives us a feel of The Empire Strikes Back a bit. And it even gives us a feel of Return of the Jedi. I mean, all of that stuff is in this one movie. All of those things. Force Awakens, not so much, but this one, yes, definitely. Besides the acting, besides the story, besides the plot, when we look at the cinematography, it's gorgeous. It's an incredibly gorgeous cinematography. Special effects are on point. I mean, you can get better special effects. The special effects in this movie are fantastic. It really looks finished. It gave itself breathing room to tell its story. And so, when it comes to the technical aspects of filmmaking, the movie is on point. Now, there are certain points in the movie, a certain scene in the movie which happens, which is, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable, the scene. I'll be honest with you, okay? So I understand where sometimes certain scenes were kind of like, what? I know they're in, but still, you know what I mean? I don't want to say much more about that. I love the twist of the plot twist a lot. It makes it very, very interesting, unpredictable kind of ending. There's a lot of tension in this movie. The movie keeps its tension all the way to the end. You feel like you're in this universe. You feel like it's a real world. So there's all of these things which makes it wonderful. Justice League. Let me tell you the truth. Justice League was not finished. It didn't feel like a finished product. There was some, and mostly due to the CGI, okay? And that, I think, is why I will have to say that Star Wars The Last Jedi is actually a better movie than Justice League for that fact. Justice League does not feel like a completely finished product. Star Wars The Last Jedi is. And I think that's why it gets a nod, in my opinion, and a lot of you have been angry at me, over Justice League. Justice League has a lot. It's doing a lot. It's covering up, and a lot it's closing the door on. But I think just the finished product of Star Wars The Last Jedi makes it get the edge over Justice League for the best movie, in my opinion, my favorite movie of 2017. It actually passes back Justice League. That's right. The other interesting thing about Star Wars The Last Jedi that I must mention to you guys is that it goes into more detail and continues where Justice League left off on Hope. And it covers a number of aspects of Hope, which I find very interesting. In fact, one of the best, and there was some appearances of certain characters in The Last Jedi that I didn't expect to appear, which was really fantastic in and of itself as well. But what I found very interesting is how this movie kind of elaborated even further on Hope. And I think because of the socio-political environment in the world today that we're in, I have a feeling that is why, to some degree, Star Wars The Last Jedi, just like Justice League, ended up being, sort of blacklisted. It's really weird how people today are viewing movies. If you look at 2017, all of the hee-hee, ha-ha, empty, kind of not really carrying a good message movies did well at the box office when it comes to comic book movies. Okay, the only one that did really well was Wonder Woman. You look at Logan. Logan's not really carrying any message that's relevant to us today. You look at Spider-Man Homecoming. Nope, not really. Guardians of the Galaxy. Not really. Thor Ragnarok. Not really. Transformers The Last Night. Not really. So when you look at those movies, they're not really politically or socially relevant. Wonder Woman was politically and socially relevant. It did very well. Because, again, people trying to play politics with it, okay? Me Too movement has happened and got stronger because of it. And people are watching that and saying, maybe these movies need not make a voice. So they start bad-talking the movies before the movies can even come out. And then they bad-talk them some more. Justice League is a very powerful movie in terms of hope and in terms of what's happening in the environment in the world today. It speaks against what is happening, and also it speaks some even more on that. Well, Star Wars The Last Jedi even goes further than that and speaks even more on the political environment in the world today, and it explains to people how they can mobilize themselves to handle that situation and how they keep that hope and that flame going. And so it's very relevant to our times, this movie, and it's also extremely politically directed. So there's a lot of interesting things about mentors to mentees as well, which is very interesting about this movie, and just about how to mobilize oneself. It's not just about having a voice and speaking up, but how to mobilize yourself. It's a very instructive movie in that regard. I would say this movie borders on it borders on realism. It borders on romantic realism. Yeah, it borders on it. Because it is somewhat opinionated, but not really. Because it's based on the Star Wars lore that it's actually speaking. It's all Star Wars lore. And there are things that happen in this movie as well which you may have read in Star Wars comics, or you have seen in Star Wars comics, but you never saw on the big screen, which you actually see on the big screen. It's huge, you know. And the gripes that people make about certain things, like Luke Skywalker and Snork, and why certain things happened, you know, the way they happened, they're fickle. They're fickle and they're flaky because the answer to the questions is right there in your Star Wars lore. So if you know Star Wars lore, I mean, you've seen this before. You've seen it in the Clone Wars. You've seen it in Star Wars Rebels to some degree. You've seen something like that happen. And if you know anything about the light and the dark side of the Force, you would know, okay, it makes sense. I mean, that's what happens. So, I mean, that's all I got to say about that. Now, finally, what is my score for Star Wars The Last Jedi? It's pretty high, man. If you're gonna score it out of 10, I give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. It was that good, and I need to go back and see it again to pick up some other things in it. So people will say, well, why do people sort of abandon Star Wars The Last Jedi at the box office? I scratch my head about that too. I think people just had certain expectations for the movie, I guess, that were not actualized. I don't go into movies with expectations. I go in to hear what the story is telling me. And I was totally invested in the story. I mean, they locked me in and I was just going with it. I don't have my own envisioned idea of what the story should be. I think a lot of people go into the cinema not to watch a movie, but to tell the movie what they expect it to be. And I just don't do that. So I enjoy it. In an interactive world where people have a say, it's kind of easy to get wrapped up in, okay, I can manipulate how this movie is told. You know, that kind of feeling. And that's stupid, okay? I think that if you're going in to see a movie, then you're going in to see what the movie has to tell you. That's the way our movie watching goes. I mean, if it was interactive and you could change outcomes, then you'd be playing a video game, I would think. You know what I mean? So I think the millennials especially, they're not really, if they don't give them what they want, if they don't give me what I want, if you don't give me what I want now, then I hate this stuff. It's crap. It's disappointing. I need to leave the movie. Like Anderson Silver was saying how, not Anderson Silver, Anderson Cooper was saying how he needed to spend more time invested in the movie and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, this is not that deep. Like, I mean, yes, there are some deep things to it, but I mean, you could follow the story from beginning to end. And I quite enjoyed it. The beginning was interesting, and almost throughout the entire movie was very interesting. And I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's the best movie of 2017. I'll say it again. A lot of people will be like, disagree with me, and they'll be like, man, but you're a DC fan. How can you say that about Star Wars? It's a Disney production. But listen, man, I judge movies on their story. I do not judge movies on whose movie it was, who made it, and so on. I'm not like that. I'm not a blind fan. Okay? And so I just saw this movie. It blew my mind away. I really enjoyed it. And I'm going back to the cinema to see it again. Doesn't mean that I don't like Justice League. I love Justice League. And I will be breaking down more of Justice League. But I will be breaking down Star Wars The Last Jedi. I guarantee you guys that. But I don't want to spoil it for you guys right now because the movie's still playing in cinemas. But give it 2 or 3 weeks and I will break down Star Wars The Last Jedi for sure. For sure. And I will show you how it's linked to other Star Wars movies before it. And also other Star Wars movies that will follow it. And it's also linked to Star Wars Rebels right now. And it's also linked to the Clone Wars. It's linked to all of them. And that's what I love about this thing. It's got a lore behind it, and it pulls from each one of the lores. The New Hope, A New Hope especially, I think it pulls from certain aspects of A New Hope especially. All right? And I like that it's about hope, because this movie's all about hope at the end of the day. And so I really enjoy it. I really like it. People will say, well, there's a plot hole here. You know, how come Luke could have done this, but in another thing he couldn't do that, and blah, 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 blah. But if you're really using your common sense, you will realize why Luke could have done that. Because Luke was, and it would explain something about the New Hope. You know what I'm saying? That's all I got to say about that. I don't want to go into details about it, but the people who are saying that, they're not thinking it all the way through. They're just acting out of emotion. They're not really thinking about the movie and what they just saw. And I think that's the problem with movies today. People underappreciate a movie because they go into the cinema expecting the movie to be something that it's not. And then when they don't get what they expect, they start blah, 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 like jackasses. You know what I mean? You go into a movie, you don't know what to expect, and you just go sit down, you watch it. And then you try to make sense of what you saw. Because if it doesn't go the way how you expect it to go, then how the hell are you going to be able to just make sense of it? Oh, yes, I didn't do this and it didn't do that, so therefore it was bad. And then when somebody starts to explain what it is you actually saw and you actually start to appreciate it and you go back in the cinema and you watch it again, then you begin... Because a lot of people now are going in with expectations about movies, and I find that really stupid. You don't have expectations for your relationship. You don't have expectations for your marriage. You go into your marriage, life is not predictable. You have expectations for your day, and if it doesn't happen, it was a rotten day? Come on, man. What kind of tantrum-filled, stupid Neanderthal thinking is that? You know what I'm saying? That's stupid. So the day doesn't go exactly how you planned it. Does it mean it was a bad day? Sometimes it goes better than you planned. Sometimes it goes in a different direction than you planned. Does it mean... It's nice that Star Wars The Last Jedi even deals with that topic. Even deals with that topic about expectations. Even deals with the topic of failure. For those of you who saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a very instructive movie in many respects as well. So I really enjoy it. It even clarifies certain things. If you don't really know Star Wars lore, then it really clarifies and crystallizes and renews, for those of you who haven't heard it in a long time, what certain things are. And I just find this a fantastic movie. I just find it all around fantastic. I think Walt Disney did a great job. It's like the Lone Ranger movie that Walt Disney put out. People were like, whitewashing! They couldn't get a Native American to do the job. Why they had to pick Johnny Depp? And they sunk the movie based on that. And I'm like, that is so freaking fickle. They're actors. We have Henry Cavill, who's a British guy doing an American accent. Nobody's saying, oh man, American jobs. Why you take a foreigner to make him do American accent, man? You're stealing American jobs. Nobody's protesting over that. You know what I'm saying? It's stupid. Alright, what happened when Robert Downey Jr. was playing a black dude? Oh, look what they doing. If the black people or something, a black person gonna play the black dude. Why they gotta be Robert Downey Jr.? Like, come on, people. Grow up. They're called actors. Okay? That's what they do. We have actors who play women. Oh, I couldn't get a woman to play the job of a woman, man. Why did Martin Lawrence, he had to play an old woman. He could have got an old woman to play that role. I mean, it gets ridiculous after a while. These bitching and moaning. And then a lot of you people out there, especially you people sometimes in D.C., you really annoy the shit out of me. You'd be like, oh, this person should really be typecast for this role. And this person should be typecast for this role. I'm like, God damn it, they're people, actually professional people who actually cast people for movies. So what do you just shut the hell up? You know what I'm saying? You're not a casting agent. Shut up. You know what I mean? It gets ridiculous because we're in a world now where people can voice certain things. And it's kind of interactive to some degree. And so people are voicing all kinds of ridiculous things. And you think to yourself, you're asking yourself, is this what the world has come to? Crybabies and whiners and people who don't change the environment they're in, but they're quick to criticize it? Is that what we have now? Is that how people always have been? But just now we have this social media now to highlight that? I mean, it really annoys the crap out of me, man. And to see a good movie like Star Wars The Last Jedi, which I believe is the best movie of 2017 when it comes to comic book movies, to see Star Wars The Last Jedi get that kind of treatment for pettiness it's just, it amazes me how shallow people can be. And some of you will agree with me, some of you will be angry with me for saying that, but look, man, I watch movies. Like, I really do watch movies. Like, I watch movies. I don't go into the cinema. I heard some other guy say that Justice League, a so-called Snyder fan, who was talking about Justice League was an unfinished work, which, yeah, to some degree I agree with him. It was a solid film, though. But he says Justice League was a better film than Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now, he lied. You straight up lying, Ninja, and I can show you why. I can show you why. I'm not saying that the storytelling is not traditional storytelling for the most part and balletic, even though it's interwoven. And Justice League had a much more grounded sort of storytelling in a certain respect. But Star Wars The Last Jedi is following in with its lore. So it has to keep in keeping with its lore, and it has to be in keeping with the world it has created. So it's going to stay consistent to that, right? And I thought the story and the plot was fantastic. But I think what gives Star Wars The Last Jedi an edge over Justice League, and by the way, Star Wars The Last Jedi is an elaboration on the story of hope that Justice League set. So Justice League closed the door, and Last Jedi opened the door. Let's put it that way. So they worked in tandem with each other, and that's interesting for me to think about and reflect on. But the thing that gets The Last Jedi the nod over Justice League would have been a masterpiece if only for its CGI. Its CGI kept it out the door of that. And one or two cheesy scenes, which we know is Joss Whedon. We know Joss Whedon did that. I know it wasn't Zach, okay? And it's okay. But the point is, Justice League would have been a masterpiece. It's not that far off. Justice League's not that far off from being a masterpiece. They need to tighten up their CGI. They better be working on it now for the DVD. I would hope. I don't know how much money they have left. But they really should get the most out of their money, Warner Brothers, for these people who did CG on Henry Cavill's face, especially at certain points in the movie. They really need to get the money's worth for that. And even tighten up a little bit on Steppenwolf's face. Because the CG in Star Wars The Last Jedi is on point. It's on point. And I would say beautiful, beautiful, beautiful worlds. Star Wars The Last Jedi has a fantastic, the fantastic work done there. I really love it. A really finished product. That's the problem with Justice League. Justice League is not a finished product. That's the truth. It's not finished. And it mostly has to do with the CG. It's not the connectivity of the story per se. There are a couple of plot holes I see in the story of the Justice League. And there are one or two scenes in Star Wars The Last Jedi that you have to suspend your belief about it. But that's besides the point. The point is, what makes The Last Jedi closer to a masterpiece? I'm not saying I said it is a masterpiece, but let me retract that a little bit. It's closer to a masterpiece than say Justice League is the finished product. The Last Jedi is a finished product, no doubt about that. So, leave your comments in the comment section below about this review about Star Wars The Last Jedi. And what you think about the best movies for 2017. I do think this movie is an underappreciated movie. I will be going to see it in the cinema yet again. I will also be going to try and see Justice League whenever I can, if it's still in the cinema. I don't know if Star Wars The Last Jedi is in the cinema in my country, but I'm going to go try and see it or cap the DVD or the digital copy or the Blu-ray. Definitely. This is a movie worth watching more than once. No doubt about it. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave your comments in the comment section below. You guys have a great one.